Paul Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox. Well, today is it. House Republicans takes first step to repeal Obamacare. Rubble stamps $9 trillion in new debt. Hey, do you remember back, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit more than a couple of years ago, there was a debt ceiling fight where Republicans, they were so principled that they were willing to shut down the entire U.S. government and default on the United States debt because they were so principled about not increasing the debt limit. $9 trillion. $9 trillion. Crazy. Now that the House has agreed to the reconciliation instructions, the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Ways and Means Committee in the House, and the Finance and Health Committees on the Senate side will write bills to repeal Obamacare. Those bills will then go to the respective budget committees in both chambers, and the two chambers will either pass the same bill or go to a conference committee to work out the differences in the two versions. The resulting legislation will then only require simple majorities in the House and Senate before going to the President for his signature. So what this means is the House passes its version of the bill, the Senate passes its version of the bill, and if there are differences in the bill, those differences can be hashed out in what's called budget reconciliation. Meaning, you can't filibuster it. It's an up and down vote. Do you agree or don't you agree? Republicans have the numbers. Obamacare is gone. Now, their plan is that they're going to let it ride for a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And that's essentially where some of the Republicans are bumping heads on. Some want to repeal it within a couple of years. Others want to wait for 3 or 4 years before pulling the rug out. Paul Ryan says, Republicans don't want to pull a rug out from people using Obamacare. But that's exactly what he's going to do. I mean, they've essentially put through a repeal without having any plan in place to replace it. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, there are 20 million people, 20 or 30, I think it's over 20 million people who are using Obamacare right now, including friends of mine. And those people were perturbed, to say the least. Look, I've said before in the video, when I was younger, I think it was maybe I think it was late 20s or mid 20s. I had a transplant. I had a kidney transplant. That transplant failed at the exact same time where I lost Medicare and my insurance at my job. Meaning, you had a transplant, you have a kidney that's failing, but you don't have insurance. And that is a shitty place to be. And I've bitched and moaned about Obamacare, mainly because I don't think it went far enough. At the end of the day, we pay more than 4 times what every other country around the world pays for healthcare. And our care is not better than every other country. I think we're ranked like 30th or something like that. So yeah, it didn't go far enough. But it's better than nothing. And the idea that they're going to pull the rug out from these guys is amazing. And what's important is to understand why. So this doesn't really have anything to do with principles. Like, it's not, these guys are so principled that they don't believe that people, they don't believe in government health care. It's not that. It's a tax cut. The question is, how is Obamacare paid for? And Obamacare is paid for with a mix of tax cuts and, tax increases and stuff like that. But those tax increases hit mainly the super rich. So, a study released on Thursday focused on 2 Obamacare taxes that targets the wealthiest households in the country, but have virtually no effect on middle and lower income Americans. One is a 0.9% federal hospitality insurance tax increase on individuals with incomes above $200,000 and couples with incomes above $250,000. The other is 3.8% Medicare tax on unearned income that wealthy Americans derive from capital gains, dividends, and royalties. The top 400 income taxpayers with average annual incomes more than $300 million each will receive an estimated average annual tax cut of $7 million for the repeal. It has nothing to do with ideology. It has everything to do with my donors pay me to keep my taxes low. And I do not want to give those poor people health care if you got to raise my taxes to do it. That's the honest truth of it. They're not going to say that, but that's exactly what's taking place. Their biggest issue was, we got to repeal it, we got to repeal it. But why? I mean, anybody in their right mind Anybody can look around the world and say, well, wait a minute, everybody else is supplying healthcare. Why is the United States the only backwards one that's not supplying healthcare to its citizens? Well, this is why. Part of it is the citizenry just don't know what goes on in the other parts of the world. The other part is the Democratic Party is so inept that for the most part, these guys can get elected. So I feel people's pain on this. And look, I have issues with Obamacare, man. I think it's crazy that you create a new healthcare plan and within a few years, in some states, it's jumping up by 50%. If you're being honest, you got to look at that and say, well, that looks a little off. But is the reaction to that to just destroy it? Of course not. You fix it. They're not going to do that. They don't believe in that. And so that's not what's going to take place. And ideologically, they don't believe in supplying healthcare because in order to supply healthcare, you're going to have to get the money from somewhere. The people who have the cash are the people who did amazingly well in this economy over the past 30 years. 95% of the gains during Obama's term went to the top 1%. Are you telling me that that top 1% can take 95% of the gains and help pay for the country's health care? Apparently not. So in the next story, and I